Hey guys, I just finished switching my receiver over on the Emax Nighthawk 280 from my Spectrum equipment to a FreeSky D4R2, and I pretty much buttoned it back up and just wanted to do a quick kind of walk around on the Emax 280 and just share some of my experiences with it and give you some tips and tricks and just kind of give it a little bit of a review here for anybody that's just maybe starting out in FPV or thinking about buying this or just already have one. I don't normally give reviews or haven't, so it's kind of a new thing for me, so hopefully it doesn't disappoint you too much. I made a little list here and first go over the pros and then the cons and then some tips that I can share with you guys. The pros. This thing really has been very impressive to me. I've really enjoyed it. I've had it for about 4 months now, and it's still my only FPV ship. I do have a larger ship that's FPV capable, and that's kind of for filming. Maybe do a review on that one another time. But from the beginning with this thing, it's honestly just been a total pleasure to use and have and learn on. And I've come, a fairly long way. In that amount of time, and overall, again, just really satisfied with it. So the things on my list here are that it was affordable to enter. I already had the DX6i transmitter for my helicopter, so the price point was about $200 and all included, and that's pretty amazing price for quality of what you're getting for this thing. So it helps you be able to get into the hobby right off the bat. Overall, early on I was crashing, from fairly good heights, and this thing would really just take a licking. I mean, it's like very few things were breaking on it, and it's just overall been pretty darn rugged. As the time has worn on, there are a few things that I'll show you that have broken down a little bit, but overall it's been pretty solid. It does take abuse real well, especially the beginner type of abuse that I've been dishing out to it. I've run it on clean flight from the beginning, and it's a really easy interface, really easy to set up and get going, and my experience being very limited, I think it responds really well, has really good flight characteristics, and is just a breeze to get set up. It's auto stability, the different modes you can select with selectors on your switches that you program. The auto level mode is super stable, and the rate mode is, really responsive, and of course that's all completely tunable, but performance is really good. The components are of pretty darn good quality. The carbon fiber arms are really nice. They're 4mm. The other plates here, as far as I can tell, they are actual full carbon fiber. And the motors, of course, are genuine Emax motors, 2204 2300 kVs, which seem to have been the kind of standard in the hobby as of late. I know things are always changing and depends on the size of your ship, but this is a 280, advertised as a 280, but I believe it's 250 millimeters diagonal. So the motors, there's one of the strong points on it, and they've been real solid. They've even taken a little bit of some hits here and there, and no problems there. The video transmitter has been really solid. I'm not sure who makes it, but 32 channels. It's, never had a problem. The camera that originally came on it was a really good camera. It had a lot of good colors, really clear, and then the machine between getting the image processed from the camera through it out to the transmitter always worked real well as well. So real nice crystal clear image. This camera is an upgrade, and I honestly gotta say that the picture on this one is not as good as the original camera that came on it. And then of course the LED bar on the back, which is really nice. Unfortunately, you don't get to choose the color unless you buy it from somebody else. They just ship them at random. I lucked out and got blue, which I prefer. So yeah. Okay, now as for the cons on this thing, I'd say its main weaknesses are the thinner plates. These are only 2 mil. Actually, that one's 2 millimeter. This one looks like it's even smaller. And so, as you can see, there used to be a little piece here, and that took some abuse. That took a hit one time and busted off. I just kind of cut it off and filed it down. And if not for this type of camera setup, the original camera mount would have been having the lens exposed with that. So I wish there was more protection out here with more durability and a thicker plate. Also, my most recent crash actually hit right here on a rock as it came down, and that cracked that middle plate, top plate, middle plate, bottom plate. It cracked it right behind the bolts there and there. So it's actually kind of tilted, and I'm just gonna not mess with it too much and just fly that until a new one comes in. So I mean, this main plate here has suffered probably the most damage out of the whole machine. Maybe the worst concern I have with it is the flight board being exposed. Here's the original that it came with that I managed to blow up because these wires here, or these solder points here, being exposed, I had picked the dang craft up right here on my bench over there and set it down with power applied to take a photo of it, and arced out this connector. Couldn't believe it. $62 for a new board simply because I touched that thing on a metal device. Major bummer. So I put this board on it, or this foam pad on it, to protect that. So I'd say that's probably its major weakness. Yes, they do paint some sort of clear protection on there in case you land in the wet grass, but they still have all these points are exposed, and maybe under normal circumstances they're not turned on or exposed. Whatever, it's a problem. The next kind of strange thing I had to deal with was the antenna arrangement. The original setup has this 90 degrees that way, as you probably noticed, with the antenna coming right off the top or right off the back, which makes it so that if you want to put your batteries in, you kind of got to wedge them around and or slide them in this way, I guess, if you need to do it that way, but kind of tends to be in the way. And also it just has the antennas most exposed at the worst place that it could be in a crash, right on the back. So I modified that just simply by turning the whole device, and I had to file out a hole here to allow the wires to pass through. I had to drill out these holes a little bit bigger so that the screws would fit in, but that has helped me quite a bit. So I would say that the antenna arrangement on the transmitter is probably another weakness. The battery strap, you know, yours won't come with this boxed in area, so that will be where you put your battery, which I do. But they give you this cool strap that's supposed to go through these slots here, and yeah, slots up in there. And the strap is like just too long to actually strap around your battery, so it's just kind of weird. I wish they would make it a smaller strap, but in the end it turned out to work out perfectly for my camera mounting. The main reason why I have upgraded this camera is because in one of my crashes, fortunately in the dirt instead of asphalt, it came down straight like this. The battery dislodged and slammed straight down into the camera and destroyed the camera from the backside, really. Just took out some of the electrical components inside there. And so when upgrading, I wanted to move to a more solid mount or a solid housing that was less exposed to those kind of problems, and ended up with the Runcam Sky Plus, which is pretty decent. And then the last thing I would say on the cons are the props that come with it. This happens to be one of the last props that I have because I really didn't fly with them much, and it's just one of the extra ones I had in my prop box on the most recent crash. So I said, yeah, let me toss that on there and get it out of here. They're just kind of really brittle, flimsy, whereas some gem fans or some of these HQs are I don't know, like nylon carbon mixture. I have no idea what they make out of these, but these things will break real easy. So the props are not very good. So by the way of just little tips that I can pass on of what I've done with it up till this point, kind of already hit on the first one. I've got this foam board that I got from the craft store. Just cut it to size. Serves as a good little cushion on it in case of a hard landing, and also protects those components we talked about. And it's pretty thick. It's about 5 millimeters thick, probably. Also, before I did that, I got the liquid electric tape. Found this at Home Depot. And covered, much like this one has here on this, covered most of every exposed point, unlike this one had. So this right here is the VBAT mod that I haven't done to this one yet. I don't really think it's necessary. So that's a tip for sure. Just cover your exposed points with liquid electric tape and with that foam board. Now, as I hit on before, there's this foam battery compartment right here, which I live in Utah and it's winter. It's been winter. It's starting to warm up now, but so I was getting, you know, reduced flight times because of cold batteries. So I think with the wind hitting the batteries, it cools them off quite a bit more. So that, combined with this accident I had where the battery slid forward, damaged the camera, destroyed it, was reason number 2. And reason number 3 that I installed this little compartment is because I have wrecked 3 different batteries. This is one of my good batteries. You can see a little spot right there. I just have it taped up because I was using this as a counterweight, little ballast real quick. I'm going to destroy it eventually. But anyway, I've damaged several batteries just with little nicks. You know, so this provides protection for the battery in small accidents and so forth. And it also insulates it. Now, with that, I ended up having to, like I mentioned before, I kind of had to wedge the battery in there sideways around the antenna that used to be right here, and that was kind of a bear. But that's been fixed, and now the battery just slides in and out. And I don't even use a Velcro strap or anything. It has an end plate there as well. So you simply slide it in, tuck the little charge cord there, and fire that thing up. And it holds the battery in real well, so it can hardly move. Anyway, 3 good reasons why I used that thing. Now that it's starting to warm up a little bit, what I ended up doing was what I ended up doing was removing the top plate. It used to have just a solid piece all the way in there, and I just made it so that the air can actually flow a little bit over, and that'll help keep the batteries from getting too hot now that it's warming up. And I'm probably going to have to cut some ventilation out of the sides here as well. But anyway, just more of that foam board, and I prefer naturally to have the battery inside this compartment that was apparently designed to hold the battery instead of on the top. And I've flown it with both configurations, and you know, it's just this works the best. Speaking of batteries, I've tried several. I was running my 2200 milliamp hour Emaxes. I still run this thing on 3S, and I've not had any problems with it. The next batteries I tried were smaller, 1300s, and they did pretty good. About 3 minutes of flight time, about 5 minutes of flight time. And then I decided to switch for a little bit longer flight time, so I went from the 1300 to the 1800. And right now I kind of bounce between the two, and all future battery orders for this machine will always be 1800s. The size is really quite well. It's about 4 minutes flight time, of course, depending on your temperatures. Where was I? The run cam. I just flipped this thing over. It used to have the shoe mount, or the U mount, mounted on the bottom, but I just actually reoriented that for different reasons. What I had to do was, once this was broken off, I've moved it back enough to where hopefully if it does take a direct hit, it's not going to take out the glass. It probably still will if it hits hard enough, but at least it's moved back basically flush. And that's why I had to reconfigure that. Anyways, these little run cams are kind of notorious for not having a real solid holding screws, so you tighten those up as best you can. But what I've found is if you just simply add a piece of Velcro on the bottom there, I don't know if you can really see it, but on the very bottom edge, Velcro there, and then a Velcro piece on the plate, and that kind of holds it, keeps it in the position you want it instead of only the screws. And there's a little bit of force that kind of squishes it together, and it holds it in there nicely. This camera is really cool. It's got a remote that changes its settings, and I've only gotten to mess with that a little bit, but just a standard setup. Plug that into the back, and it's a remote control. This here would be the original camera that it came with, and the part that it broke off is right there. I tried to solder it, didn't work. The camera is really pretty good, this one. Okay, on to the GoPro mount. I guess that is one other thing that I might say that's kind of not really set up for a GoPro, is the original configuration. You've probably seen the pictures, or you have it, and it's more set up for a Mobius camera. So it's got these little holes, or these little rubbers fit in those for holes normally. I struggled long and hard trying to get the GoPro balanced there, and that was one of my main issues initially with getting my battery back here farther. Oh, I think that was really one of my first complaints, is if the GoPro's clear up here and this battery plug is here and you're trying to slide your battery back, you have problems. So anyway, to get around that, I found somebody had this tip on YouTube and I adopted it. Basically just move the whole mount back, rotate it 90 degrees, and the one guy, he had his just zip tied right to the top plate. I have little cushions of earplugs used. And by doing that, you get a little bit of a tilt action there, as you can see. Again, the battery strap, the original battery strap, works real well. And I use a little bit of Velcro, of course, on the bottom of the camera. Some of that super fine, thin Velcro helps. And stays on nice and secure. It can break loose in a crash, and it kind of rolls wherever it goes, but does okay. This is the layer lens, which I would highly recommend. I need to get some replacement front glass pieces, or they're actually polycarbonate or some sort of plastic, but I need to have some spares on hand because inevitably it one day will bash into that thing, bash into the curb or the tree or whatever. I have broken the standard GoPro issue ones fairly easily, and this is my GoPro 3, and this is the third glass lens that's been put in it. Well, the original was the first one, and then this is the second replacement one, and it's not a lot of fun trying to rebuild a GoPro. I have another video on my channel for that if you want as well. One last thing on the GoPro is, in order to protect the LCD, I use some of this tape, which is also highly recommended, or which I also highly recommend, is this Gorilla Clear stuff. I use it everywhere. It's this double stick jelly, fairly thick tape, and it's awesome. I use it everywhere. So I stick a layer of that on, and I leave the plastic cover on, and that helps at least provide a little bit of cushion if it hits something. I used to have a piece of a Maglite, just a little plastic Maglite lens cover, and I ended up taking that off, or I lost it or something, but so that's what I'm using for now. Okay, and the last thing on the layer lens is, instead of the original Velcro straps that hold it on, I just reverted to one of these little hair bands, bungee, and that way it just pops on and off a lot easier. I use zip ties here because I've lost 2 of these already, and I only have 3 left, and I'm hoping, or 1 left, no, 3 left, because they give you a spare. So I got tired of losing those, so those are just to retain those things when it crashes. I guess one other pro about it is the original antenna that came with it is it's actually a left-hand circular polarized. Everything else most people have is generally right-hand circular polarized, as shown there. And this antenna is really pretty good. I've gotten a lot of good range on it, and it's kind of a backup. And you know, I read all over the internet that left-hand circular polarized is totally incompatible with right-hand, and I have found that to be exactly not true. Exactly the opposite. Just as clear of an image. Kind of weird. I don't know, maybe it's just me. This was the IB Crazy race spec antenna. Really a pretty good antenna, I would say. Pretty well built. Took some abuse, but eventually that thing busted right off back when it used to be mounted right here in the back. So I have now moved on to these really nice antennas I got from Get FPV, and very affordable, and there's 2 of them, and Even comes in this really cool box with a little magnetic lid. And the range tests I've done so far are really good on these things. I'm very impressed with them, and the mast is much stiffer. Obviously, this thing will not hold a bend real well. This thing will hold pretty much 90 degrees for the most part, if that's what you want to do. Okay, to try to wrap this up, this little piece of Velcro right here, I used to have my one of my voltage detectors on there, and then a little zip tie going around it, so I could just have that sucker plugged in flight. And I've kind of gotten away from that, and I just basically run off a timer. These three items right here, I talked about the tape, the liquid tape, and if you don't have any of this contact cement, I would highly recommend it. It makes everything in life a lot easier. You can reuse super tough Velcro if you want. You can make anything that used to be sticky again. Really is what it comes down to. I use it all over the place. And I also really like the zip tie antenna mounts. So that's it. Hope it's useful to you, and I'll talk to you on the next one.